Hi, it's Nick from the podcast. Just a quick note to say that yes, you're not imagining it. My audio on this episode does sound a bit like I'm broadcasting from the bottom of a steel drum. Sorry about that. I'm not sure if I selected the wrong mic or if my nice podcast mic is finally dying after nearly a decade of consecutive MFV podcasts. But either way, as you can hopefully hear now, it seems to be working okay at this separate occasion, so hopefully it'll be better for the next episode. Let's find out together. But for now, yes, sorry about the slightly grating experience you're about to have.
Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And in today's episode, we will be becoming a different person at work in the second season of Severance, and then staging a virtual production of Hamlet in the world of GTA Online in Grand Theft Hamlet. But before all of that, Nick, do you have something with an outrageous premise to recommend to our listeners?
As a matter of fact, I do. I went to see the recent movie adaptation of Dogman, the graphic novels by Dav Pilkey. These are, of course, a massive global smash hit. I believe probably among the most popular comics, certainly one of the most popular non-manga comics in the current world, read by thousands of children. I've went on Goodreads once and saw a range of reviews from parents moaning that their kids won't read anything other than Dogman. So yeah, doing well, Dogman, and here it is at last on the big screen. And yeah, I like these comics. These comics are good, silly fun. The premise of Dogman, if you somehow missed out on this global media empire, is there's this guy who is a cop in this cartoon world, and he has a loyal dog, and they are in hot pursuit of Petey, the evilest cat in the city, and they find one day that Petey has lured them to a location and set a bomb, and the bomb goes off, and unfortunately the cop and his dog are both horribly injured, and they go to a hospital, and the doctors discover that the cop's head is damaged beyond repair and the dog's body is damaged beyond repair. So in a moment of Frankensteinian inspiration, the doctors decide to attach the dog's head to the cop's body, thus preserving the surviving parts, and thus the resulting being is now Dogman, a man-sized dog cop.
Okay, that's a great premise. Kind of similar to RoboCop, but similar, yeah. But good.
Yeah, it's some good sort of child logic. Yeah, it's fun. And yeah, Dogman is basically a man-sized dog. He is basically a man who runs around jumping on people and licking them. Except he's also got the head of a dog, so it's not quite as weird as it sounds. Maybe.
Not quite as weird, but still pretty weird.
And yes, Dogman goes on to become the popular super cop of his city, although the joke is that he is in fact just a man-sized dog. He mostly just runs around, chases things, gets distracted by squirrels, and mostly just inspires the other characters with his friendship and loyalty, whilst crucially also being basically incapable of day-to-day life or speech. So that is Dogman. In practice, it's mostly a story about Petey the cat accidentally cloning himself and creating this sort of pseudo-son figure in the form of his own clone, who he then learns to love and moves slowly towards redemption. That's the actual plot of Dogman. But Dogman is also there, inspiring Petey to be a better person.
Sounds good. So did the film capture the crazy, silly tone of the comic well?
That is one thing the film definitely did, yes. It definitely captured the oddness of it, the willingness to be incredibly silly. As with a lot of film adaptations of comics, I think it compressed what was about 5 or 6 graphic novels worth of story into a single film. Like the aforementioned story arc I just described, the whole Petey redemption thing, takes place quite incrementally over many, many books. Whereas in the film, yes, they're well on the way there by the end of the one movie. And as a result, I'm always going to like the comics more. I feel like the comics get into this journey a bit more. But that is always the downside of adapting this heavily episodic sequential art form into single movies. I've complained many times about how Spider-Man and stuff would honestly be better suited to be a TV show than a film. And the same is also true of this, but they do a good job of capturing the aesthetic, the tone, the wild manic anything can happen vibe, the range of silly puns. Yeah, there's some good stuff here.
Okay, cool, yeah. I mean, I'm surprised this wasn't made into a TV show, as it's very popular and, it's something for parents to park their kids in front of when they need, half an hour to themselves or whatever. But it's good to see that, they're still kind of making big budget kids films for the cinema. This one's been released, I guess, in time for the Easter holidays. Or I guess, parents will pay money to take their kids to the cinema again because they'll be quiet for an afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, in practice, I think it was more released in time for the last half term, and I'm just taking a long time to get round to it, but yeah. Yeah, it's nice to see an animation doing well. It's a weird sort of pastel-coloured, chunky 3D animation. It's maybe a bit less... I mean, describing Pixar animation as realistic is probably pushing it, but it's a bit more cartoony and a bit less aspiring towards realism than Pixar sometimes gets. And as a result, I think that makes it more fun.
But it is 3D animation, not, say, 2D animation a la, Spider-Verse.
The Spider-Verse is still mostly 3D animation, isn't it?
Actually, bad example. I think Spider-Verse mixes like all of them together, doesn't it? Because like each spider person has their own like animation aesthetic. So that's probably a really like bad example. Okay, so classic 2D is like, X-Men 97, I suppose.
Yes, that's 2D animation. And no, it's not like that. It's 3D animation a la Pixar films or most of Spider-Verse. And yeah, it's got a fun look. It's a bit video gamey, maybe, at times. It reminds me a bit of old 3D video games. But it does look very good and very smooth. And yeah, it enables them to do all the silly jokes and particular stuff. And obviously, the fun thing about Dogman is that it does have the sort of silly, manic, slightly surprisingly violent edge that kids obviously secretly really like. Like Dogman being blown up and then Frankenstein's together into a single being with his dog is quite grisly, actually. And obviously, although there's no blood shown, they're still very much embracing the silly grisliness of that.
Yeah. I mean, Tom and Jerry is incredibly violent if you watch it, and those old, Roadrunner cartoons and things like that. But yeah, kids love a bit of the ultra-violence. I'm glad that's continuing. I guess it sort of adds to the sort of silly, crazy tone. Anything that's incredibly violent, usually ends up as slapstick, which is why if you're watching something, like the more violent Tarantino films, it actually comes across as silly sometimes. So yeah, I can kind of see how that works, and it's no better is it United than in kids' entertainment.
Yeah, the other big change they've made from the comics is there is a little bit of an effort to make Dogman a bit more of a protagonist and give him some actual feelings, which sort of works. It's kind of interesting, but they do ultimately back off from that a bit and go back the way the comic does, where Dogman is kind of a passive, lovable, good guy figure who doesn't really get to reflect that much on the strangeness of his situation or ask whether this man misses his past life or anything.
It doesn't suffer any existential crisis now, the fact that he can't live like a man and is forced to live like somewhere between man and dog.
Yeah, the eternal outsider, trapped between man and dog, never fully one and never fully the other. Yes, that is never really fully explored. There is one bit where he goes back to his old house and an estate agent turns up and says, "Oh yeah, sorry, your girlfriend already sold it and moved on. She's got a new man and a new dog." And
okay, that's pretty funny.
And Dogman looks absolutely heartbroken, which is a weird combination of hilarious and quite sad. And
that does sound very good, yeah. Yeah, because it does make you think, it does make you wonder, like, what happened to Dogman's previous life? Do his parents miss him, so that now that he's a dog?
It's never really brought up. He is beloved in his new life, and that just has to be enough. It's a very silly story, it's a very silly franchise, and as I say, I do, as I would, hold to the belief that the comics are better, but this is a good, fun, animated movie. If you want to laugh, you could do a lot worse.
Sounds good. Yeah, and if you want a recommendation for something children's related for Easter, I think it's still in the cinema, so yeah.
I think it's trailing out of the cinema, but to be honest, that probably doesn't mean it'll be on streaming any minute. So
that's a good point.
Check it out if you can. Alistair, what have you consumed?
Well, I also have a film to recommend, which is a movie called In Camera. That was a film that I've been excited to see since it caused waves at the London Film Festival last year. I first found out about it on the Little White Lies podcast, Truth in Movies, when they had a special episode for the film festival last year on up-and-coming British talent with kind of exciting new movies at the festival. And this was one of the ones they highlighted. I watched it on Mubi because, signed up to Mubi for Grand Theft Hamlet, which we'll come to. But this is really good, interesting, odd film. It's a British film about this young man who's trying to make it as an actor, going to auditions, living in a flat share with other creatives and young people. And he realizes he's slowly starting to lose his identity as he constantly is sort of inhabiting other people, saying other people's words, reading other people's lines, being someone else. This is quite well conveyed through the film's slightly odd tone and visual approach. There are lots of shots of him hanging out in rooms with men who look very similar to him and all wearing the same clothes as they all wait to audition for a part or for a photo call or something like that. And this sense of who am I as I just meld into the background of all these people who only are slightly different. And it's kind of got this weird sort of odd tone in that the film's quite funny, but not in a real, belly laugh, hilarious moment funny. It's just slightly got this odd, slightly weird tone to it, and that's done visually and through the plot. He gets a few kind of odd jobs as an actor, including in one kind of weird bit, this thing when he's pretending to be or acting the role of this couple's son who's died, which then just leads them to having a breakdown, which is quite funny. In a sort of weird way, and he has these kind of weird jobs, auditioning for this toothpaste commercial when they just keep asking him to smile more and more, and the smile just gets more and more ridiculous. So it's kind of funny, but also kind of weird. I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's very much a tone piece.
Okay, I mean, honestly, listening to you talk about it reminds me vaguely of Hacks, sort of comedies about showbiz, but are also kind of sad.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. This one's very slight, yeah, but yeah, you get the sense of this guy, he doesn't really know where he's going in life. Yeah, and he's suffering this sort of identity crisis. Yeah, there's other weird things going on, yeah. He's got one flatmate who seems to be some kind of ace or successful fashion person. He seems to dress celebrities and just goes around being stylish. That seems to be his job. Yeah, his other flatmate is a doctor who seems to be having some kind of breakdown, again induced by working nights a lot. He has these bizarre hang-ups from the vending machine from his work, and he just sees it everywhere, including like in the middle of the road when he's driving. But yeah, I get the sense that this is made by young creatives trying to capture the weirdness of being a young creative.
Yeah, it does sound like the sort of film you make after you've, had a few auditions and decided you just want to do something to try and capture your experience. I guess in that way I don't know if it's any level of semi-autobiographical.
I get the feeling it is, yeah, inspired by reality. I mean, it seems to be quite well observed, like sort of, yeah, the weird details of what it's like to be a jobbing actor. There's some quite good bits when, like, he auditions for various films on TV shows, and then as he's auditioning, you see kind of what the show would be like, and they're quite, well realised. There's one when he's auditioning to be in a sort of CW-style teen sci-fi drama about some high school jock who discovers he's an alien and has weird powers, and yeah, it kind of cuts to a scene of him in a diner as this sort of jock doing an American accent trying to like talk to his girlfriend in a sort of very scene we've seen a lot of time played out through various streaming service sci-fi dramas. But it's also kind of weird because he's just reading off like a production assistant who's not an actor, so the person playing the girlfriend is like totally wooden and just reads the lines in a really like sort of deadpan way while he's acting. But then this is all done in like an American diner with like lurid lighting and sets and props and things like that. It's kind of very weird. There's a few scenes like that. There's another one when he's playing a Middle Eastern terrorist, yeah, in some kind of hostage drama. So yeah, it's got these kind of weird sort of vignettes in it as well that kind of add to the sort of general sense of, well, weirdness for the tone, but also I guess the sense of disillusionment and loss of personality as he becomes these like different people.
And does it, I guess this is on the verge of asking you for spoilers, so feel free to be vague, but does it rise to a massive conclusive climax? Or is it one of those things which has no real big conclusion because life has no real big conclusion?
It's very much the latter of those.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't quite sort of stop. There is a sort of concluding bit, but it doesn't have like a huge moment like with a big breakdown or something like that. What it does have, at the end is this sort of sense of, yeah, life goes on. This is a continuing process that just is kind of going on and on as different actors go through the same process of auditioning and becoming different people. The final scene involves him meeting a production assistant from the opening scene, thus creating this circular story. It's on the arty side. This is why it's found a home on Mubi and yeah, got discussed in Truth in Movies and things like that. But it is like really interesting, yeah, sort of young film from some young creative talent. It's got a really good like visual style. It's very well directed. There's a real thought, I think, into things like the lighting and the production design. I've seen a lot of like first features and like low budget indie films, especially British ones, and there are a sense of like this is just a person in a room in a regular house doing these scenes. Kind of feels more like a play and things like that. Whereas like this one, they really have put a lot of effort, I think, into like using all the cinematic arts. There's kind of slightly odd music. The lighting is kind of on point, but it creates a sense of weirdness. The clothes and production design further add to the weirdness. There's all sorts of bizarre scenes of him sitting in rooms, either dressed with people who look the same and him getting confused with other people, or him in waiting rooms with all these people in like bizarre costumes. That's never really explained why there's also like a kid dressed as a ballerina pushing a piano because it's something showbiz, but you never really find out what that's about. So I really like the fact that, yeah, they've really brought the creativity on, I'm sure, what was probably quite a tight budget. This was made by BBC Films, so I guess they had some money behind them, but probably not oodles of money.
Yeah, it sounds good. I mean, I guess if you're gonna, make your indie projects, then you do want to try, ideally, make something with a bit of, a bit of experience, a bit of specificity that only you could make or something. And it sounds like they've at least tried to do that.
Yeah. The main actor is sort of British Asian, and like I think the director and writer is British Asian, and I think there might be also something about the British Asian experience in there. I'm not, I guess, really qualified to discuss at length, and it's not something that the film like focuses long on. It's not about someone directly experiencing racism as a personal colour in the film industry. Although, yeah, there is a bit when he's not forced, where he auditions to play very generic Middle Eastern terrorist because, yeah, he's an Asian man. His flatmate has this sort of bit when he's talking about that, yeah, it's the moment for like Asian people to really like grab culture by the by the horns, and that's why he's making waves in the fashion business. But I think, there's something to do with that is, I don't know, this sort of Asian identity. He's sort of blending into the background with these white men who look kind of similar. So that goes back to what you were saying, that it is trying to say something very specific. It's got this element of specificity. It's got this kind of experience these people went through, but it's all kind of below the surface of this kind of weird tone. Strange things going on. Very much a tone piece, but as we've been talking about last time, with things like Mickey 17 and before that Companion, I feel like tone is very important to me. Something I've been focusing on a lot in recent reviews, and I'm sure we'll come to in the stuff we're about to discuss.
Well, I think especially in the world of infinite content, having a unique tone and feeling different to everything else is probably one of the main things you can do.
I mean, there are so many like crime dramas that just do BBC crime drama on streaming and things like that, but I guess I'm not so much drawn to that. I mean, my partner does watch a lot of like such and such, but they solve crimes, or procedural things like that. I'm always drawn to, I guess, something that has like a sort of a feel to it, a distinct. It's not about genre or setting that I like. What stands out to me is something with like a distinct or unusual feel, which this film does have, which is why I was really glad to track it down. And I can see why he was making waves at the film festival, and it was good to finally get to see it.
Okay, and first review today, it's the second season of Severance, finally back after a fair few years. This is, of course, the Apple TV drama about a company which employs severance technology that enables its workers to have an entirely separate personality within their own brain for their time at work. So while their outie lives a blissful, carefree life in the outside world, as soon as they get in the lift and come into work, then their personality is replaced with that of their innie, this whole other person that only exists in the workspace. Obviously, this series drills into, the details of that and realistically, the kind of existential horror of it, whilst also exploring the slightly surreal world of this underground company that actually does these things, and increasingly getting into the question of what they are actually trying to do. And yes, this is the second season, picking us up after the first season cliffhanger when the work personalities, the innies, managed to briefly take over their host bodies outside the workplace and see the whole outside world that they were missing out on. And now we return to see how that has affected their shut-in lives. Alistair, what did you think of this?
Well, I really liked this second season. The first season was, I think, my number one show of the year when it came out. So there was a lot of excitement. It was obviously very well received. And, there's a lot of anticipation built up for the second season. And I think it managed to live up to the hype by, broadening the world out, introducing more, and continuing the story in a sort of really exciting direction. I got completely sucked in. It probably helped that, I'd saved up about the last 4 or so episodes and watched them quite quickly over about 2 days. So, really getting that sense of momentum towards the end of the season. It built up to the climax. But, the last few episodes especially had really exciting and sort of intriguing stories behind them. Also related to what I was literally just saying about in camera. I love the tone of this. It's weird and dark and funny in that, there's can be some quite dark moments. There's people dealing with grief and loss, and there's this sense of control and abuse. We might get into plot specifics, but there are definitely some very dark things going on with some of the characters. But it never strays far from the sort of bizarre workplace things that are going on. There's lots of odd things going on. There's a bit where the character Mr. Melchek receives a series of paintings of the founder, but himself as the founder of the company, which is just a really bizarre thing. There's a child they work with called Miss Wong. That's not particularly explained. There's a brilliant bit in the final episode with a team in the company called Choreography and Celebration, who seem to be some form of marching band. So there's always something kind of weird going on. There's something funny, something dark, but also this is kind of balanced against the drama and the sort of darker sides that are going on. So it's a difficult thing to balance, but it does it well.
Yep, I also enjoyed this a lot. I think certainly the tone of it is one of the big strengths. I think they've definitely done a good job of establishing this world, and they're having fun sort of playing within it. They've got a good sense of what the next weird thing to show should be, and how they can hint and tease, and how they can just, be entertaining in themselves. Like, as you say, the appearance of choreography and movement, or whatever they're called, in the final episode was extremely funny. It's a bit of a spoiler, I guess, but there you go. I feel it doesn't really cover the plot. And I think they're, for the most part, doing a good job of teasing out the actual plot too. There's a version of this show where they're just throwing weird shit at you every episode, so you could just go, ooh, and...
Cough, lost, cough.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
It wouldn't be a year of MFV if you didn't mention Lost at least a couple of times. I, of course, have never seen Lost, but I've heard the rumours. Yeah, they are, I think, developing the actual plot, like especially the key main character storyline with Adam Scott's character Mark Scout, or Mark S. His sort of slow but sure progression into the heart of Lumen to try and locate his wife, who appears to have either been kidnapped by them or voluntarily agreed to undergo some experiments. Pointedly, we still don't know. I guess that's also a spoiler. I really must just drop a spoiler wall soon. And yeah, they are developing that storyline in a way that does at least give you the sense of some progression. If everything I'm saying sounds like there's a but coming, then there was a point towards the end of the season where I did start to feel that we were getting into, as I say, I haven't seen Lost, but into the point you get with a lot of these mystery shows where they were just circling the central thing without telling you what it was in a very frustrating, rambly way where they're very much on the tightrope, teetering on the edge of falling down and vanishing up their own bum. We can think harder about the gymnastics of that later. And
Thanks.
Yeah, it's a difficult road to walk, and this sort of show, which is obviously, I think, what the trope watchers call a mystery box show, is always going to be struggling a bit with that, and I think it is still something they could fall into. Personally, I'm not sure this show should run forever. I would not be entirely disappointed if they said that the third season, or at least the fourth season, will be the last. But for now, I think they're just about keeping the ball in the air.
I mean, to be honest, they could finish it here. We could discuss the ending in more detail, but I feel they could leave it there. I don't know if that was deliberate in case they don't get another season, but I do agree with you that this doesn't need like 5-6 seasons. Again, problem with Lost is probably stretching the mystery out for 5 or 6 seasons made it too convoluted. But what I did like about this is that you got some explanation of the mystery. They did reveal some things. This isn't a show like Twin Peaks where, to be honest, you don't really have much explained or really understand the big thing that's going on beneath the surface. Twin Peaks is very much characters on the edge of something weird and cosmic, trapped in their own little drama, and you never really find out the shape of the whole thing. I mean, that's very much integral to the nature of Twin Peaks, especially the last season, that you don't really know what's going on. This show I like the fact that it wasn't quite like that, in that there was some revelation. They did reveal some things. Again, the plot line with Mark's wife, they did reveal most of what was going on there. One of the central mysteries, macro data refinement, where they refine these numbers. They did reveal what the numbers symbolize and exactly what they were doing and why Mark was essential to this. Not going to reveal that now. If you've not seen it, it's a good twist. But if you are concerned that it is just meaningless chaos piled on top of meaningless chaos, that's not the case. So I like the fact they're like peeling back the nature of this workplace. They are revealing things, more is explained, but they haven't got to some point when it's just like, this is it, this is the deal. They're still preserving that sense of mystery and intrigue and weird things to come. Whether that will become tedious if it runs over more seasons, I mean, definitely if it goes to a lot. So I agree with you that it should be wrapped up in a couple. But for now, I'm very pleased with the balance of explanation versus preserving some of the mystery.
I do think that, as I said earlier, they do a good job of keeping the characters moving forwards and getting further into the storylines in a way that's quite engaging. I thought, Dylan's storyline this year was very good. Very sort of sweet on a sort of human level. A good sort of storyline you get in some of these premium telly shows where it's morally complex in a way that isn't immediately obvious, and it's not immediately clear who's in the right and who's in the wrong. It's just an interesting, difficult situation to explore. Yeah,
it's very much a character arc. And I thought, he's a well-developed character, the character of Dylan. And it's well acted as well. But it wasn't so much to do with the big mysteries of Lumen, what they're up to and what's going on with Mark's wife, the kind of core plots. It was very much a moment of like, but what does it really mean to live these two lives? How different are innies and outies as people? What happens when there is an overlap between the two lives? So all of that was really interesting, and I liked it a lot. That was definitely one of the highlights of the season for me.
Yeah, and I also thought, for all that I was starting to get a bit, are we wobbling on the edge of wank here? Around episode 8 and 9. I thought episode 10 was really, really good. I thought that was a really, really exciting, compelling final episode. They really went in hard on the action and the things actually happening in a way that did make you feel like, okay, this has still got some energy, this has still got some momentum, I'm still here for season 3.
Yeah, both seasons build to them, the innies, I guess, staging some kind of operation, or actually, doing something to take on Lumen, and there's tension there, and some good twists. And in the final episode, slightly longer, I think it was an hour and 15, so you're getting on to feature length, but it was a really good, tense, dramatic bit of storytelling, so it ended on a high.
Yeah, and also there's a moment towards the very end where one of the characters, Mark's Innie, makes a morally difficult decision, which is not necessarily the heroic sympathetic option, but you can understand why he does it, which again is good writing at this sort of premium telly level.
Yes, and they successfully introduced conflict between the innie and the outie as different people. They're becoming their own people and stuff, and it is interesting explored that, yeah, they are both the same and different, which is well done because it's the same actor, and they haven't gone for something, ridiculously over the top, like one of them is super angry, one of them super chill or something like that. But as you've watched this show and seen all these episodes, you are now beginning to see the difference between the innie and outies, their personality. It's more apparent in the character of Dylan, which was more directly explored in this season, but definitely in the final episode they explored the tension between the two Marks, and that builds up very much to the climactic moment, which created real drama when there's a conflict between the two Marks, which of the two is going to win out, and also had some surprises. Again, I'm talking in very cryptic things because I don't feel the need to spoil the ending by saying that there's some good drama here and it's going in an interesting direction.
Yeah, and I think Helly, the other main character, also gets some good moments where a lot of her good bits are perhaps collected towards the first half of the season. But still, there's a very good twist with her and some very good moments scattered throughout.
Yeah. I would say there's quite a big supporting cast of characters, in this as well. I mean, everyone gets their moments. Irvin has an interesting plot with, his romance story with the Christopher Walken character.
I was getting to that. Did you fully and comprehensively understand what was happening in the Irving storyline in his last couple of episodes?
I feel one of the things is that it did kind of drop off a bit. I felt they could have done more there because he's hardly in the last episode.
I don't think he is in the last episode.
Yeah, his storyline did fall off a bit, which is one thing I felt could have been weaved in a bit more. What I did understand is it's uncovering more about the nature of Lumen. I think we're going to have to start dropping spoilers, I think, to get into specifics. But there's the main scene with Erwin is when he goes to dinner with the Christopher Walken and they're outside Lumen. There might be some spoilers in this, although not big ones for the ending yet. But yeah, and then when the Christopher Walken character's husband starts talking about he's been working on Severance for 20 years, and then Erwin's very much like, but it's not been around that long. I think that's the crucial point. There's some kind of bigger mystery that couple know more about the deal with Lumen and the secret they're hiding. I think that's what it was gesturing at, but it's not picked up, so I guess something for the next season.
Yeah, I got that. It was the last episode when they were taking Irving to the station, and then they were getting on a train because they had to because of something, and I was sort of sitting there going, you're saying words to each other. Certainly words are being said. I don't fully get what either of you mean, and it's kind of getting to a degree, but it's kind of just obfuscating.
Yeah. I guess coupled that with like the very cryptic way that the senior people talk, Keir's family, whenever they appear. I've forgotten the surname because I'm fighting really hard not to say either Keir Starmer or Keir Hardy, but too many Keirs. Keir Egan. That's the characters, the Egans. Yeah, the way the Egans talk in that very cryptic way. And at one point, Helly just sort of shouts to them like, can't you talk normally? And obviously it's like, well, that would just reveal everything.
Well, yeah, I could let them off having the sort of lofty, shadowy villains talking in riddles. But when the main characters who are meant to be, like, following the storyline with start doing it as well, I just get a bit, you're risking losing me here, guys.
Yeah. And there's also that bit when Irvin and the Chris Walken character, when someone's looking through some papers that have some key information, but the way it's cut together, I'm not sure if that was Irving finding some documents in their house or if it was the Chris Walken character's husband looking at them. And also then the way it cuts together. I mean, the show is very well done and very precisely edited, so that sometimes one thing that follows something else aren't necessarily connected. So you don't know if you're seeing a connection that's real or not, which again is a cryptic way of explaining something, but you just have to watch it to find out. And sometimes it's quite good for building up drama, but sometimes it's just straight confusing. And again, I don't know what was meant by those documents that were shown. They had like some of the characters and some dates on them, and so I got the feeling that's another clue, but I don't really understand it. I mean, maybe this is all building up to some really ingenious revelation in the next season, if they do have a master plan for it, or maybe just be revealed they're just throwing out random stuff they might pick up later, might not. Some of it might lead somewhere a la Lost.
I imagine it might be some combination of the two. I mean, I mean, the other problem with this show that you always feel bad complaining about, but does nonetheless exist, is that it's been like 3 years since season 1, and I didn't have the time to rewatch it, so I wasn't perhaps as immersed and fully present in everything as I perhaps could have been to get the most out of it. I hope it won't be another 3 years till season 3, because, at the moment I feel quite invested and involved in the storyline, and I'm slightly concerned that by the time season 3 happens, I'll have forgotten who almost everyone is.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably benefit, especially with the third season, of rewatching the entire first and second season, just to be clear of everything. I mean, for Dark, that's what I did for each season, rewatch all the previous stuff before watching a new one, because it's very complicated and there's lots of characters. But also, the third season of Dark came out during lockdown, when there was a lot more time for TV watching.
Well, yeah.
And you do try to stay abreast of modern TV without having time to rewatch all of Severance. Although it would be a fun project because it is a good show. I mean, I do kind of really wish I'd rewatched the first season of Arcane before watching the second one, because I'd have probably found it a bit less confusing. But yeah, there is a lot of elements to this and a lot of moving parts. So I do hope it's not 3 years to the next one, because, to be fair, I just want to find out what happens as well.
And to be fair, the scale of it and the nuance of it and the extent to which they're exploring this technology and this company and this world is part of the appeal,
Yeah.
It's probably not entirely accurate to bitch about the fact that, it's quite complex and there are a lot of characters in it.
I mean, it does have the best elements of Twin Peaks with an actual conspiracy theory thriller where, you have to give out answers and things like that. And it's got this silly, funny, weird, sort of bizarre workplace tone where everything's slightly corporate, such as they're sent on this bizarre wilderness adventure stroke dangerous situation, but it's a team building away day. You can't see the air quotes that I'm doing. Everything kind of relates back to something kind of dark parody of something corporate, which is in some way just a sort of satire on American corporate existence.
Yeah, I mean, for all that I enjoy some of the more lofty, ambitious sci-fi bullshit they pull, I will admit the most compelling, fun parts of this show are often the parts where they're just straight up satirising the corporate environment. That is probably still some of the most successful parts.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that in the first season, and they've maintained that in the second season, maybe dialed it back a bit as they brought more plot to the full, but it's still very, very good. And like I say, yeah, probably at its height with their team building away day on like some kind of frozen wasteland.
Yeah, that was an extremely good episode.
Yeah.
Conversely, I thought the standalone episode about the Harmony Cabell character was a bit one of these episode streaming shows sometimes like to do, where they decide to devote a whole episode to a side character, and you come away thinking, well, that could have been like 2 scenes in another episode.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Harmony Cabell's an interesting character, and Patricia Arquette is very good in the role. I mean, this shows a great cast, John Turturro, Gwendolyn Christie, Christopher Walken, Adam Scott, it's a very good cast. But, that was the classic thing, as you say, it could have been a few short scenes. I mean, shows like Into the Night, which are really, really fast-paced and really tight on drama, they do like the backstory of each character in like one scene. I've talked about Into the Night in this podcast before, saying if you want to see just a masterclass of efficient characterization driving drama, that's how you do it. Some of these premium shows which are slower paced and a bit more arty, sometimes it crosses over into get back to the exciting stuff. This is just a bit long.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe there's people out there who thought that episode was a masterpiece of suspense, but I just sort of sat there going, why is everyone talking so slowly? Why are there so many long pans of scenery? When is something going to happen? What have I actually got from this? Yeah, I mean, as you say, Patricia Arquette is very good, and maybe it was just, compensation for her not having that much to do in the other episodes this season, but I don't know, that was just a bit of a low light for me, that episode.
Yeah, I mean, I did like about it the sort of, again, the visual style and aesthetic of the show is very good. The kind of the way it's set in this bleak Winter's Bone-esque post-industrial small town in America where everyone's got extreme religious views and it seems quite poor and backward and is clearly implied as like crystal meth or something like that going on. I quite like the aesthetic of that, but as you say, that could have been like 2 scenes, but it kind of contributes to the overall aesthetic of the show, which I really liked, especially the Lumen Innie bits, which are very much riffing on the back rooms. This idea, it takes place in this seemingly infinite, certainly impossible to define how big it is, bizarre corporate world of just repeating endless conference rooms and workstations and stuff, with occasionally strange stuff thrown in, and it's never explained how it's built and where it come from, and also there's this kind of world in itself, in that the innies can never leave it and the outies can never really get inside it. So it's definitely picking up the back rooms, which has become this weird internet thing that's sprawled over into various bits of media. I mean, I mentioned others before in this podcast that do. There's a book, The House of Leaves, that caused, quite a lot of stir about 20 years ago that riffs off this aesthetic. And this show is definitely working this aesthetic, but in a slightly different way, in that the point of the back rooms, especially the best backroom media, is that the back rooms are kind of infinite they've sort of always existed. There's no real reason or explanation to them, and there's no purpose to them. It's more sort of like just about exploring this bizarre space. Whereas this locates that aesthetic very much in a drama show. So we do know more about this space. It was created by the Lumens for a purpose, and that we've discovered more about that purpose. So I kind of like, this is sort of, I'd say, backrooms adjacent media, in that it's using that aesthetic, riffing on it. It's definitely nodding to that for the people who know, but this isn't a backroom story because it's telling its own story. I don't know, in the same way that like a lot of stuff, you say like, say, Fontaine's DC, they're not really punk, but they're using a bit of punk in it. It's kind of like a flavour they cook with, to mix my metaphors really quite extremely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as well versed in backrooms as a phenomena, but yeah, I'm familiar with the sort of blank corporate aesthetic they're playing with. Even this sort of endless corridors thing, it's familiar to me. I've seen it as a sort of form of corporate horror in other media, and Severance is in some ways just the ultimate, or at least one of the big manifestations of it, using all that sweet apple money to create this sort of endless labyrinth.
Yeah, exactly. It's very well realised, which again is possible because again they've got experienced production design. And the show is like, made by Ben Stiller, is a big name, or at least used to be, and certainly carries some clout. And it's got lots of famous people in it. I assume, it's Ben Stiller's connection that brought them people like John Turturro and Christopher Walken and things like that. There was also some good cameos in this season. Mentioned Gwendoline Christie. There's the first episode of the second season when Mark has a different team, including Bob Balaban and Alia Squacat. I'm sorry about the pronunciation for that. But anyway, maybe from Arrested Development. And that was nice. Again, they're getting some, more people in it, some high-profile people. I guess now that the show's got some clout and some notoriety, people want to be in it.
Yeah, no, in a increasingly, scattered world, it is fun when something like this does seem to become actual communal viewing for once. It's been entertaining watching along with this. For at least the second half of the season, I more or less managed to keep on top of it, and it was vaguely enjoyable watching along with the internet and seeing people actually get more and more into it.
Yeah, definitely has created momentum online and shaped the discourse and things like that. Yeah, I've seen YouTube videos exploring it, giving people a lot to think about. Certainly the choreography and movement bits have, I've seen that done as GIFs and clips and things like that, and made jokes, including one great one which said that, choreography and movement should be the next Super Bowl halftime performers. So it's cutting through people who talk about beard scratching TV to, at least the internet discourse.
Okay, and lastly today, it's Grand Theft Hamlet, a documentary which we tried to see at last year's London Film Festival and failed. So here we are, finally covering it now it's on streaming. This is about two actors who, struggling for direction in the pandemic, decide to try and stage a production of Hamlet in the game Grand Theft Auto Online. And this film, which takes place basically entirely inside the game, or consists entirely of game footage, chronicles that effort. We have seen it. Alastair, what did you think?
So it's a crazy concept for a film. It kind of sells itself based on the premise. When I usually do a slightly odd intro to the films, this one required no embellishment. Yeah, and it's kind of funny, violent, chaotic. There's a bit quite early on when they try to read some monologues in the Vinewood Bowl in GTA Online, and it just ends with rockets being fired and people being shot, which kind of gets across how crazy and chaotic this concept is. But it's also a really deep and quite moving film. It really captures the bleakness of lockdown. This kind of interview segments, like great documentaries, get under the skin of their subjects. There's a quite sad bit when one of the people talks about how he's lost every member of his family and he doesn't have much going on in his life other than this bizarre play they're putting on. There's a real sense of alienation and things like that caused by the pandemic. So it is quite deep and probably one of the most powerful and affecting pieces of lockdown media that I've seen, even though it's not directly about lockdown, which is what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, it's a strange combination of a sort of an ode to quirky creativity, but also, it's definitely a very pandemic piece of art. You definitely find yourself sinking back into the pandemic mindset, or at least remembering that mindset whilst watching it, this sort of weird way in which stuff happening sort of online or in these virtual spaces you can access from your house become somehow all-consuming or more important than anything else. As ever, it's fun to see a film made about the online world taking it, fairly seriously and having a full knowledge and understanding of it. As you say, I enjoyed the constant risk of someone just running up and killing them.
Yeah. It's like the sort of bizarre and chaotically violent world of GTA. But I think the point they make is a really good one, that Well, Shakespeare is really violent as well. And, like, you know, in Hamlet, like, pretty much everyone dies. And, a lot of the other plays, especially the tragedies, there's a lot of death, there's a lot of violence, huge amount of death in Romeo and Juliet, all the rest of it. So, yeah, actually, I think, they're spot on. GTA is kind of the ideal setting for Shakespeare.
Yeah, sure. Let's just move all the plays into Grand Theft Auto for now.
Yeah, why not? They do a good job of it.
But yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, as someone who hasn't played massive online games, I don't know, I never really had a hardcore phase of it, but it's been a while since I played them at all much, to be honest, apart from like board game stuff. And yeah, there's a part of me that's always taken aback by how impressive and how massive these things now are.
Yeah, it's massive, considering I don't think GTA Online is even one of the biggest. Like, it's not like World of Warcraft or something like that. But yeah, it looks like an enormous world, and yeah, it did make me think like, wow, this does look like fun and great to play. You know, I thought they did a great job, of just capturing the world of GTA Online. I mean, it's really beautiful. Like, there's just like long shots in this film of like sunsets, and these are virtual sunsets, or like the environments they go in. There's like bits about the cities, and there's countryside bits. There's a bit when they go out to a small like bar in a rural poor area. Again, not too dissimilar from the community depicted in the Harmony Covell episode of Severance. It kind of really captures how beautiful the world of GTA is and how realised it is. And they use it as a great backdrop for this production, so that went well.
Well, yeah, but look, I mean, GTA is a very sort of this sort of crime melodrama. All these environments are set up to provide the right backdrop to your sort of crime showdowns, which, as luck would have it, is also a good backdrop to, if you want to like perform a Shakespearean monologue with something cool behind you. Yeah,
they lean into that and things like that by using the whole environment. The whole thing begins because they discover this place, Vinewood Bowl, which is like, a version, I think, of the Hollywood Bowl that's just, just like a big stadium that's just there. And they do some monologues and some rehearsing there. But then when they get to the production, they try to use a variety of locations and stage it like across at least some area of this world of GTA. So there's like a bit when they get on top of a blimp, and there's a scene that takes place on a blimp and things like that, and they use various other places and settings around the world of GTA for the different scenes of the play, which kind of uses it as a great backdrop and shows the world really well. It also leads to chaos and confusion, especially as during the actual production the blimp crashes into the roof of another building, which is, again, just brings back the hilarious comedy aspect to something that's, quite deep and intellectual and arty.
Well, but it stops it getting too, I don't know. I think the scrappy underdog vibe, the sort of idea of it's just these people putting together this thing in an environment which, it might look cool, but it's not designed to do this. They are, fighting a certain amount of constraint. And I think that just makes it, in some ways, more interesting and more likeable to watch.
Exactly, yeah. So like a scrappy underdog, a bit sort of punk kind of hacking culture, a bit sort of like, DIY spaces. That sort of stuff and experimentation went on during lockdown because people had to find new ways of making culture. I mean, they're two unemployed actors. They say several times, like, all the theatres shut. There's nothing going on. I mean, during lockdown, I remember watching like a play from the Old Vic that was, sort of live streamed on Zoom. So, it was Matt Smith and Claire Foy in the empty Old Vic, with you in a Zoom meeting with them, in essence. Which was, again, a strange thing that could only have ever happened during lockdown.
Well, yeah, but I think a lot of the more touching part of this film is the connectivity of it, the way that a bunch of people do actually come together and they do actually find people who want to do this. Like, I don't know, maybe in reality the process of finding enough people who actually wanted to do this was harder than it looks in this film, which is quite brisk and quite, keen to move on to the next thing. But nonetheless, it does spotlight how nice it is that there actually is a community who wanted to come together and do this.
Yeah, but it also gets across like how difficult it is just to stage plays or any kind of creative process as well, which, I know from writing and also, from starting a theatre group at uni, that like they're dogged by the same problems that offline non-lockdown theatre companies have. People drop out, everyone's doing it for free in the spare time that they have, because this is, again, it's not a professional production. People drop out, they get other work, people are unreliable, people have difficult schedules, everything has to kind of be sort of like held together on a shoestring. And it kind of just, as you say, captures the constrained nature of indie or like creativity and things like that. They find this guy who wants to play Hamlet and they think he's really good and that, he's working out well, but then he can't dedicate time to it because he gets an actual paid job and obviously he has to take that and prioritize that. There's a whole bit about one of the people, he's married and he's got kids. So there's two actors doing the production, and then one of them, the wife of one of them, is a filmmaker and she's the one filming it and documenting it and things like that. But there's various bits when they reveal this puts a strain on their marriage because he's spending all this time in GTA doing this production, not living in the offline world. But he's got to fit this around his other commitments. So it is good at conveying what it's like to do a play. It's hard work. work, when you're not professional actors. And it gets that across well. But again, it's not about that. It's kind of about doing this in GTA, but it still conveys, what it's like.
Yeah, and as someone who isn't, particularly involved in the theatre or hasn't tried to stage a production, I mean, I've successfully made comics with teams, I guess, but, not to go too far into the details of my exciting projects, but a lot of the time there I'm just, paying people to do stuff. This sort of project where you're relying on a lot of, goodwill and free time does look like it would be even harder than that.
Yeah, exactly. But you're right, there is like a real community that kind of comes together who get really into it. It's interesting that a lot of them are people who haven't acted before and things like that. And, maybe they find the fact it's virtual, it's not themselves on stage, it's their GTA character, like sort of liberating. I think one of them is like a literary agent who loves Shakespeare and always wanted to be in Shakespeare, but hasn't actually done it. There's some other actors. There's just some odd people who just turn up for no reason. There's one quite moving bit where one guy is clearly not acted before, hasn't prepared anything, but he just sort of reads from the Quran. I think he's from somewhere in the Middle East or North Africa. And yeah, it's kind of, again, this sort of inspired indie creativity of these people coming together and doing this is quite nicely captured, the sort of bizarre sets of people. It's made weirder that this guy's avatar is like a sort of naked, sexy green alien, and he sort of twerks his butt at various points. Again, the film's never far from something bizarre happening. I guess that's because of the setting of GTA.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've got to, again, lean into the incongruous internet humour aspects at some points, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But yeah, there's a great sort of bunch of people behind it, and there are some quite deep bits when they talk about the different elements of the characters and what appeals to them, and they explore in detail some of the aspects of Hamlet and stuff. There's an extended bit when they talk about the famous to be and not to be monologue, and also what it actually means, or their interpretation of what it means, and how the people relate to it. That is non-existence better than existence? It's quite philosophical. There's an interesting bit when one of the performers who's trans talks about how they relate to Shakespeare and the character being a trans person. It was also brought by the fact they guess, in the world of GTA, they can express their gender identity maybe better in GTA than in the offline world. So it does get into some quite deep and poignant stuff, and there's a lot of deep thought and intellectual bits to this, and deeply emotional bits to this, as well as the chaos of blimps crashing around them and twerking aliens.
Yeah, and despite that, as I said, it does clip along quite fast. It's only, a shade over 90 minutes, this film. Packs a lot in.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It's fun, it's chaotic, it's crazy, yeah. I feel this has, again, made some waves at the festival. It had 3 screenings at the London Film Festival last year. One of them was in the IMAX, which would have been amazing to go to. Yeah, Britain's biggest screen. But the 2 non-IMAX screenings, which are the only 2 I could make, sold out pretty much straight away. It was the thing I tried hardest to get tickets for at the film festival, and it sold out straight away, so it caused a bit of a buzz. I mean, I think when I discussed the festival on the podcast, it was possibly a bit of an underwhelming year. Some of the big stuff wasn't so well received, like the Elton John documentary and Night Bitch. But this was something that really grabbed people's attention. And I mean, I've been talking to people who aren't cinephiles, but are interested in culture hacking or just weird and strange culture, different things. And they've seen it. So it's a cool, weird indie thing that people are into. And I really like it. I think it's great. I'd recommend this film to anyone.
Yeah, no, this was really good.
That's all we have time for this episode. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe in your podcatcher of choice and leave us a nice review to help other people find out about the show. You can also head to our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can listen to previous episodes of the podcast, or bonus audio clips, or read written pieces by Nick and myself.
And if you want still more beyond that, why not follow us on social media, where we are MFV Podcast on Twitter, and I believe we're also on Blue Sky, where Twitter has basically cloned itself. And you can also find me on Blue Sky and Instagram mostly as Nick Bryan, as Brian with a Y, and there's more details about my self-published comics at nickbryan.com. New one coming soon.
If you want more from me, you can search for Alistair Ball on Blue Sky, Instagram or TikTok, where I am most active. You can also get more of my writing at redtrainblog.com or find my theatre reviews at everythingtheatre.com. And you can join us here next time for a teenage murder special, where we will be discussing the 3rd season of Yellow Jackets and Stephen Graham's new drama Adolescence. Join us in 2 weeks to find out what we thought of that. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.